Welcome, everybody, to a Friday night edition of Shoot the Gap, the IDP Fantasy Football podcast here at Fantasy in Frames. I'm your host, Jorge Edwards. We got Justin Taylor, as always, joining me. And tonight we're going to be talking about IDP players you must draft in startups in 2025 right now. Before we do that, let's hit this. JT, my man, how are you doing?
I'm doing good, man. Been firing out these podcasts here lately, all kinds of stuff, talking everything. So me and you been a little while since me and you been able to jump on a talk IDP because of some scheduling conflicts and some other things going on lately. But pumped to talk tonight about it, and then hopefully get a couple more shows coming up here in the next week or two.
Yeah, like we were just going through our schedule before we hopped on, and it's like we got to talk about rookies, rookie prospects for IDP purposes, not just from how they are as far as like real talent, but like which ones are going to make, good IDPs for you in rookie drafts. And we were thinking about how the hell are we going to cram all this in before free agency starts? And then it hit me, we could just do 3 episodes next week. Tuesday talking about rookie prospect linebackers, Wednesday talking about defensive linemen, Thursday talking about defensive backs. So you have 3 episodes to Shoot the Gap. You missed us for a bit. Well, we're back in full force.
We're coming in heavy. We're coming in heavy with the rookie talk next week.
That's right. And then before you know it, folks, free agency is going to be here. Going to reach out to a special guest. Hopefully he'll be able to join us on free agent week. But man, a lot of shows are coming back here at Fantasy in Frames. We got, just everybody is starting to trickle back in. It's like, all right, report to OTAs, and everybody's reporting to OTAs. It's, even if it's not mandatory OTAs, people here at Fantasy in Frames, they're here, they're ready. They're ready to get you ready for this season in Dynasty, as well as for redraft down the road. But, before we get into our topic for the day, we're going to be talking about IDP players you must draft in 2025. And we're not just talking about some of the big name people. We're talking about the people who are going to be helping your roster as a whole. And so, that's not to say that we won't bring up some big names here and there, but for the most part, we really wanted to narrow this down to non-household name players. But before we do that, let's get into some quick news and notes. So the Raiders recently have re-signed Max Crosby to a 3-year deal. I think $100-something plus million.
He's getting that money.
He's getting that money. And there was all this talk about in the offseason, well, if they don't do this, I want to be traded, or if they don't do that, I want to be traded. What this and that translated into is, if you don't pay me over $100 million, I want to get out of here. And
if you give me over $100 million, I probably will stay. I'll stick around. I guess I'll suck it up, take one for the team, and I'll stick around.
Exactly. So obviously we like Max Crosby. We've seen the production from him just on the field all the time now. So whether it's redraft or dynasty, he's definitely one of those upper echelon players that if you're able to get in your leagues, you definitely want to smash that opportunity. Another piece of news here, and this is for me. I love this. Bobby Wagner re-signs with the Washington Commanders yesterday. I did not know he was his own agent. So that was
saving that percentage, baby. Saving that percentage.
Yep, he signed a 1-year, $9.5 million deal. So good for him. Great for the Commanders. Keep that veteran leadership there, as well as Bobby Wagner, 34 years old, still playing strong. So you got to love it.
Yep.
In terms of news that just broke today, which may not be it's not IDP related, but why not talk about it? Because, no, I take it back. There are 2 pieces of news. One, defensive tackle Jonathan Allen released by the Washington Commanders. Now he gets to hit free agency and get a fair deal. And then the news that just broke about 15 to 20 minutes ago, non-IDP related, the Seattle Seahawks have just traded Geno Smith to the Las Vegas Raiders, reuniting with Pete Carroll there in the desert. So, you know,
this is going to be crazy here because this makes this, even though it's an offensive move, this is going to have dynasty impacts all over, including defensively, because this is going to change some stuff for the draft. Raiders going in looking, most people talk about QB. My favorite landing spot for sure, Sanders, was with the Raiders at 6. They make this move. Looks like they're not going QB. I could see them maybe going a younger QB later in the draft. Maybe they take somebody in the 3rd or 4th round. But you got to think Geno here. Pete Carroll knows him. Pete Carroll wants to win now. I mean, he's in his late 70s. I mean, this guy, he don't have time to wait around. He's ready to roll. So making the move to a guy he knows, I think makes a lot of sense. I tell you what, be interesting to see if Tyler Lockett maybe ends up there. Another guy he knows that's a free agent from Seattle. They're making some moves. Now, what do they do at 6? This could get wild at 6 for the Raiders. Do they move back? I've seen a lot of people going Ashton Jeanty to them at 6, which, we know the Raiders, they love their offensive guys and studs. They have no problem drafting guys higher than everybody else thinks they should. So I think they could go there. Do they pair? I mean, we know we've got some stud defensive guys in this draft. IDP wise, do they go like a stud defensive end to put with Max Crosby on the other side? Do they add a linebacker? We all know they need DB. Do they go like a Will Johnson from Michigan or someone like that? So this to me now really opens up the possibilities for the Raiders at 6, and who knows, maybe they do a slight move down for someone that really wants to come get someone and they add some extra picks. It'd be interesting to see what they do here.
Yeah, I would not be surprised if they go running back. We all remember, back.
Pete Carroll loves running backs. Is anybody drafted a running back in the 1st round more than Pete Carroll? I don't know. He's always grabbing guys. Pete Carroll, you know what? I wouldn't even be shocked if they took running back at 6 and then turn around and took another running back in like the 3rd or 4th round. Like that's how much Pete Carroll loves running backs. So I mean, I could absolutely see them double tapping, especially in this super deep running back class. I wouldn't be surprised if they went with like a GT and then try to get a pass receiving back, someone like a LaQuinn Allen or a Woody Marks. I think would be a really nice fit if you got him with his receiving profile, the backup GT. I think that would be a really nice little 1-2 punch for the Raiders. So this is open up some possibilities. And, you got Bowers, you got Jacoby Myers. Like I said, maybe a Tyler Lockett gets there. I could see him going wide receiver possibly in the 2nd round. Their defense was better than I think we thought they would be this last year. They are losing Nate Hobbs. So that is an IDP relevant thing to remember that. There's a couple good spots he could go. I know the Steelers are showing some interest in Hobbs. I think that would be a great landing spot. If he could play that slot corner for the Steelers, I think would be phenomenal. But that's going to be interesting too to see if they go cornerback or replace him with a slot corner somewhere in there as well.
And, with the moves that they're making here, meaning the Seahawks, like look at the free agents that they have now because of being released or just them reaching the end of their contracts. You have Draymond Jones, you have Ernest Jones, you have let's see here. I mean, those are the Rayshon Jenkins. These are all guys who are going to be, not Seattle Seahawks potentially. With Ernest Jones, that's we're going to get into a Seattle Seahawks linebacker a little bit later. And it may or may not be Ernest Jones, but the defense as a whole, I think, is going to take some hits. And with the offense not looking too good right now, and if it becomes a patchwork offense, I mean, right now the starting quarterback for the Seahawks is Sam Howell. So
Sam Howell to the moon. Sam Howell. Let's just, does this not feel like rebuild for Seahawks? It's like they've been on that brink the last couple years, and you were like waiting for it. They finally got rid of Carroll, they got rid of Russ, and it was just like they've kind of been floating the last couple seasons with Geno. It feels like new coaching staff, like also it feels like they're ripe for a rebuild here. Let's get some picks, get an extra 3rd rounder. Do you maybe roll with Sam Howell this season. Go with somebody like him. Let him, for fantasy purpose, just pepper JSN all day long, 15 targets a game. And then, just keep getting this draft capital and kind of just remake this team. It seems like the time for the Seahawks. They've just been right there, but it's like this team feels like it's right for a rebuild.
No, it does. And the beauty of that is that means the defense is probably going to be on the field a lot, which means you're going to get more opportunities for these linebackers, for these box safeties.
Devin Witherspoon this year. Come on. Bounce back season for Devin Witherspoon, I'm telling you right now.
Yeah, we were so high on him going into last season.
Still like a lot. They didn't have the numbers last year, but we know that's the DB curse sometimes. Sometimes these DBs, they still have good seasons, but you just don't get the production. I think he's right for a bounce back next year.
100%. Thank you very much to everybody who's joining us right now. If you could, also, besides just giving us a follow at Fantasy and Frames on X, whether it's X or Instagram or Blue Sky or Threads, we'd really appreciate you if you did it over on our YouTube channel. Just give us a sub there so that way you're notified when Fantasy and Frames cranks out all sorts of podcasts and video content. We'd really appreciate that. Man, so yeah, that is some news. That was some news. That was some notes. Let's
also another one that's might be offensive related. Getting some word that the Giants are possibly coming up to 1 in the draft here. So this will be interesting if the Giants make the move to trade up to get QB at 1. They're sitting at 3. And you thought maybe the QB would get to him at 3, but maybe there's a little difference here. This is a win now. Giants, it's not necessarily win now. The team is built a win now, but their coaching staff is up against it. Like they've got to put a decent product together this year, or at least they've got to take a young quarterback and show that they can build this guy and that they have a future. So I think the pressure's on the Giants making a move up. See if it's for Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders. We'll see who they like better. It seemed like Shedeur was going to be the guy at 3 for them if he got there. And now it's seeming like a lot of talk around the Browns are absolutely loving Shedeur at 2. So with the Titans at 1, the question was, do they trade out or do they take Cam Ward or Abdul Carter? I agree. If I'm the Titans, I move this guy. I move him, give Will Levis another year. I know I've talked more smack about Will Levis than probably anyone on the planet. But this team is not a quarterback away from winning at all. If I'm them, I move down. I try to move back. I try to get a Travis Hunter. I try to take Abdullah. Especially if you can get Abdul Carter, if you can turn around and move back to 3 and get him the guy you probably wanted anyway, and then throw on an extra first or second or something in that mix, I think that's an absolute move the Titans should make. And again, I think you give Will Levis the shot this year. If he absolutely doesn't improve at all, okay, you're right back at the top of the draft next year and you draft another guy.
Right. I forgot some other key pieces of information. Drama going over there in Cincinnati. Trey Hendrickson wants to trade
big one
to oblige him. Sam Hubbard got released earlier this week. Harold Landry got released by the Tennessee Titans today. Some really interesting pass rushers, and I look to teams like Washington, not to be so biased here, but one of the things they lacked last year was good edge rushers, and they have a high number in the salary cap in terms of availability. And there's all this talk about Myles Garrett, let's go get Myles Garrett. And then it's like, well, if we don't get Myles Garrett, Trey Hendrickson, it's pretty good. And you really want to go discount, you go Harold Landry.
I wouldn't mind throwing a pretty big deal at Trey Hendrickson for like a 2 or 3 year deal. I mean, the guy's 30. He's put together back-to-back 2 of his most productive seasons ever. He's just a dog, man. I like Trey Hendrickson. He's one of those guys you're like, oh, where would he fit well at? Everywhere, right? Like, I don't know. There's a team he wouldn't be good on. He would be nice everywhere. So I think it depends on who misses out on the draft, who has the money cap space to get him with the cap going up. The salary cap going up is nice. So I would think most teams are going to be high on him, and he's probably, my guess would be he's going to look for a winner. either a winner or some team that's just going to absolutely throw a crap load of money at him. He's like, I'll take a winner. A team's going to throw a crap load of money at me, whatever one.
Well, we talk about throwing a crap load of money at a player. Let's talk about some people in Dynasty for IDP that maybe we want to throw some value picks here. Let's start with the defensive line. Let's start with your first defensive lineman, and then we'll kind of go back and forth. And just to give you an all idea of how we're approaching this from a type of IDP league where you get, big play points. You get, 5 points for a sack and an interception. You get, 2 for a quarterback hit, 3 for a tackle for a loss. Like, you really give these IDPs a lot of value with the plays they make. As well as you have like tackles worth, 1.5 and then assisted, 0.75. And so you really, like I said, you give value to the different IDP positions. So with that in mind, let's start tackling, no pun intended, or maybe there was, some of these players for Dynasty that we want. Who do you got as a defensive lineman here, JT?
So this is a guy I've been high on for a couple of years, and now I absolutely love the position he's going to be in, and whether people, especially in a startup, are going to know, and really he's going to be top of mind. He's a guy that could drop, I think you get great value, but I just love his game, and that's Tuli Tuapolatu for the Chargers. Already cut Joey Bosa. He gone. We've got Khalil Mack. He's a free agent. Do they bring him back? I would assume no. At this point, maybe they end up working out something with him, but he's getting up there in age. I could see them going another young guy in the draft with how good this defensive tackle D line DN draft is. I could see them going there, but I think Tuli, man, I like him a lot. I've liked him a lot for years. I've got him on a bunch of my IDP leagues. I've got him on a ton because I just really like his game. And he's a guy that anytime he's played for Mac or for Bosa in the last couple of years when they've been injured, he's been productive. He's been very productive, very nice win rate, very good sack rate per play when he's out there. And now you're going to go into a year where you think this Chargers team's going to compete. They seem like they're ready to be a team that's a playoff team right now. And now he's going to get full playing time. He's going to get all these snaps at the end. I love it. So for me, a guy that's outside that top 10 or 12, that's not a smash everybody wants. He's a guy I got my eye on. I want him big time. I want to come away with him in a draft. Like, I absolutely, outside of any of the top guys, and he's still real young, only going to year 3. He's a guy I absolutely want to have on my team.
No, I don't blame you one bit there. Like, you hit the nail on the head. When he took over for either Bosa or Mac, the guy just plays lights out. And we've been waiting for him to have that opportunity for a couple of years. And, fortunately or unfortunately, depending on how you look at it, Joey Bosa has given him plenty of opportunity just because he has been, injured, And so we saw the shimmer of light there, and now we're going to see it in full bloom, full blast.
And as somebody, awesome. I have to be honest with you, in one league, I have all 3 of those guys in one IDP league. So it's going to be nice that I can okay, Tuli's going to be my guy now. Now I know I can clear cut probably start him every week now in that league with a little more, now that we can kind of see things have cleared out a bit. But if I'm in a startup, he's a guy that's real high on my D line DN list of a guy I want to keep an eye on and definitely make sure I come away with him in the draft.
100%. My guy, he is a Philadelphia Eagle. Ooh, cringe, boo, die, Eagles die. No, I'm just kidding. That's a little bit extreme. I'm sorry for those Eagles fans paying attention there. Josh Sweat not looking like he's going to be coming back to Philadelphia. I talked about him towards, the end of the year on Shoot the Gap last year. And, I have been very high on Nolan Smith to end the season. And I think he's one of those guys who's going to get that opportunity and take that next step forward. We look at some of his stats from last year, 7 total tackles, 11 quarterback hits, 39 total tackles, 7 sacks.
20
Wow.
Not 7 tackles, 7 sacks.
That would not be impressive. 39 total tackles, 11 quarterback hits. In the postseason, even better, he led the team with 4 sacks and 5 quarterback hits. We saw him make plays in the Super Bowl, against Patrick Mahomes. I mean, who didn't on the Eagles' defensive line? But, Josh Sweat, like I said, he's not probably going to be there for Philadelphia. And this kid is really fantastic. You go back to, weeks 10 through 18 last year. He was one of the better, pass rushers, if not the better pass rusher for the Philadelphia Eagles, tallying 21 total pressures on 4 sacks. I mean, this kid has the makings of it. There's a reason why he was a first-round pick a few years ago, and he is somebody you could build your defensive lineman future for IDP purposes. This Eagles defense is legit. That's the thing. The Eagles have done such a great job about building redundancy after redundancy after redundancy. They always have people that just can fill in the gaps here at any position. And I think Nolan Smith is the guy that you want to build your IDP league around. And let's face it, when we look at some of the other big names among defensive linemen, he may be well known amongst some circles, but I would dare to say, as far as like the majority of people playing IDP fantasy football who may be newbies to the game or kind of, people who like look at season stats and they are like, oh, well, as a season as a whole, he wasn't that great, but they don't look at the trends in production as the season went on. He may not be somebody who jumps to the top of your list. I think he's somebody that you could definitely grab at a value, to be honest with you. Right
Absolutely.
Now, I think you should definitely take advantage of that.
Yeah. I mean, absolutely stud athlete, was one of the best players in the nation coming out of high school. He's going to be going into year 3 in the league. He just turned 24. I mean, in an IDP Dynasty startup, sign me up for Nolan Smith. I agree with you. He's a guy that doesn't quite have, name recognition yet. So like you said, I think you're going to get him maybe at a little more of a value there. But he's a guy that's just ready to break out. Like he's ready to break out big time. I like him a lot. I think that's a great call.
Thank you. It's almost like us great minds think alike. This is amazing.
That's right.
Yeah. Who do you got for your second defensive lineman here, JT?
Second guy on my list here, and this is a value pick for me. There's other guys that are more highly rated on this defense, a little bit maybe better players currently, but I like the value I'm getting here, and that to me is Trayvon Walker for the Jags. Got Josh Allen Hines, who a lot of people, consider a top 10 overall IDP guy. He's a, defensive end. Most people probably have him in their top 5. Walker, former number 1 pick, really has kind of, when they drafted him, everybody kind of knew like this is going to be a little bit of a little work. He was young. He didn't have a ton of playing time at Georgia. They were drafting the upside with Trayvon Walker. And I tell you what, he showed up last year. 31 solo tackles, 10.5 sacks. A guy that's still, if you look at where you're going to have to take Josh Allen Hines compared to where you can get Trayvon Walker, give me Walker for the value all day long. I'd much rather have him. Again, a guy's been in the league a couple years. Young. Another young Georgia dude. He's just going into year 4. And he just turned 24. So he's going to be, end of the season. He won't even turn 25 till the end of the year. So a guy I like a ton, former number 1 pick. You knew that he, had the ability, had the expectations. And this is sometimes where you get these a little bit of a discount in these startups because he hasn't necessarily hit as a former number 1 pick. So people kind of give him that bust, tag. And he hasn't been a total bust. He maybe hasn't lived up to a number 1 overall pick expectation, but he's starting to come around. And now you got that you're starting to get the statistics to meet up with the expectations. He's a guy that I still think is being slept on. I jumped on him in a ton of leagues last year, but in a startup, if I'm missing out on those kind of top end guys, he's a guy that can get you double digit sacks that you can get rounds and rounds later. He's a guy that you can probably get as the somewhere between 20 and 25 defensive end in your league. So to me, I love that value. He's a guy I want to add that I just think people are still, even with the 10.5 sacks last year, I think people are still slightly sleeping on him because, if you look at the beginning, here's the other thing with the 10.5 sacks, Jorge, I want to bring up.
Yeah.
That's 2 years in a row. 2 years in a row with double-digit sacks. You would never think that. No one talks about him like that anymore. Had 3.5 sacks as a rookie, 20-year-old rookie. Last 2 years, he's played every game. He had 52 and then 61 tackles, over 10 sacks both seasons. Still being slept on. Give me Trayvon Walker.
As soon as we finish going after our second player, there's another person who's had back-to-back sacks as a defensive tackle that I think you and I are both high on. So a little tease there for people watching, especially those who play in defensive tackle leagues. My second guy is Nick Bonito. The second that the Denver Broncos traded Baron Browning to the Arizona Cardinals, Nick Bonito went off. Weeks 10 through 18, using Fantasy Pros IDP scoring, he was the defensive lineman 2, averaging 15 points per game. Again, using Fantasy Pros IDP scoring, which you can find over at fantasypros.com. Yes, Fantasy Pros, you can cut me the check now. We only reference you like every single episode, so that's just either here or there. But no, Nick Bonito, just playing lights out, since, like I said, weeks 10 through 18, 32 total pressures, 9 sacks. You look at more of the stats here. Let me pull this up really quickly. Yes, Jorge was prepared. You look at the sacks, 14. You look at the tackles for a loss, 16. You look at the quarterback hits, 24. I mean, like I was just saying, tackles for a loss, 3 points each. Sacks, 5 points. Quarterback hits, 2 points. And we just said 16, 14, and 24 respectively. I mean, that adds up. That adds up real quick.
Mm-hmm.
So again, he is somebody that the Denver Broncos had been wishing to get more playing time, but they had kind of like a bottleneck because they had Baron Browning for a while. Jonathan Cooper's on the other side. And, eventually they had to make a decision last year. Like, who are we going with? Is it Browning or is it Bonito? And Bonito just showed more flashes in previous seasons. And they were like, you know what? Let's sink or swim. We're going to go with Bonito, and we hope it pans out. And it did. And again, whether it's Nolan Smith or Nick Bonito, these are people that you can kind of wait on in your startup drafts for IDP and really attack other positions like linebacker and go after some elite linebackers here and there and not have to waste your first couple round picks. And I say waste, like it's not a horrible pick. These are not horrible picks, but like you find better value at defensive linemen, especially in leagues that are big play leagues in the later rounds, and you can really focus on the linebacking position and establish your veterans there. So, I'm all on board Nolan Smith and Nick Bonito this year.
Yeah, I love Nick Bonito. When I was making cuts on a few IDP leagues, he was one of the last guys I was really hurting on positions. I was like, man, do I keep Nick Bonito? I was like, he's been solid. He's young. He still has upside, but he's not a full-time starter. Luckily, I kept him. And he came through for me, helped me make the Final Four in a league I probably should have probably won the championship, but CMC injury buried me. But he was great down the stretch. And again, if you have people that are drafting in your league that are straight going off scoring from last year, which I know a lot of people don't, I always pull up the last year's scoring before I pull up the projected scoring for the new year to kind of see where guys went when I'm doing drafts. If people aren't going off last year's scoring, I don't think he's been properly adjusted in rankings yet, as far as where probably Bonito should be ranked compared to the year he had last year, I think you can still get a little bit of a discount on Benito. Because if you are deep into IDP, you know what kind of year he had the year last year. But if you ask a normal average NFL fan, they probably wouldn't even know what team he plays for. So he's still a guy that's a little bit hidden. So I think that's great value.
Got Jamie in the chat. What's going on, Jamie? Jamie, you're late. It's okay. And you know what? For those who are jumping in right now and missed the first part of the show, go over to our YouTube channel. Hit subscribe while you're there. And you can watch a replay of this. We'll also have this in podcast form go out tomorrow morning. So again, if you're looking to specialize in some of the shows here at Fantasy and Frames, and it's like, well, I want IDP, I don't want Dynasty, I don't want Redraft, I want just IDP. Wherever you listen to podcasts, search for the Shoot the Gap podcast, subscribe to it. You'll hear JT and I week in and week out give you some fantastic and winning IDP fantasy football advice. All right, let's go as far as defensive linemen into a couple sleepers here. Coincidentally, I didn't tell you about mine until I just figured it out right now. But coincidentally, it is both of these players are on the same team, the Miami Dolphins. Jamie's in the chat saying, "I'm so used to you guys always at night." Yeah,
well, we're usually the late show. We've been having to adjust it up a little bit here lately with things here in the off season getting a little crazy. But yeah, usually we are the late show. But like I said, we're going a little earlier. I got a couple things I actually have to do late tonight. I've got an employee who's got a birthday. I've got to go out and take him out for a little bit. So, but Jamie was great. He hung out with me and John McGlynn on a couple shows earlier today here on Fantasy and Frames. If you missed those, go back and check them out. We did a rookie mock draft, 5 rounds, kind of broke it down. One we did before the NFL Combine, and then we did one after the Combine and kind of compared them. And then we continued our rookie spotlight series, and we talked about Tyler Warren, the stud tight end out of Penn State.
100%. And seriously, like at JT, I don't know how you do it, like 7 podcasts in a row. Can you do another one? Yeah, sure, why not? I'm just like,
keep it going, Lord, man. I get in that zone. I'm like a racehorse. I just get in the zone. I just keep going, just chugging along.
Get the blinders on.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay. So one person for the Miami Dolphins, and speaking as a defensive tackle here, I found him very useful for me in my redraft leagues last year. I know we're talking Dynasty, but 29 years of age, and we've talked about it earlier, in a previous Dynasty episode talking regarding IDP. IDPs, they last longer than players on offense. And so even though he's 29 years old, Zach Seiler is still a very good player at defensive tackle. In my redraft league, one of my redraft leagues last year, I actually had him slotted as a defensive lineman overall. And people are like, why would you do that? Why would you not use an edge rusher? And I'm like, well, this guy has been putting up, double-digit sacks, 10 sacks the past 2 years. He has just been unreal. We go back to last year as far as his other metrics here. And again, we talk about how these other metrics can add up from a fantasy point perspective. He had over 40 total tackles. He had 10 sacks. He had 19 quarterback hits, a forced fumble, a fumble recovery. The guy is just a menace in the interior part of the defensive line going against other guys. And you look at, how just how well he played. And again, value. He was second on the team through weeks 10 through 18, in pressures with 9 sacks. I mean, he, bow down to Zach Seiler. Give him more respect here, especially in defensive tackle leagues. What are your thoughts on Zach Seiler there, JT?
I agree with you. He is just value. Like I said, straight value. I mean, people kind of forget about him. In a defensive tackle start league, absolutely, he's a playable guy every week. If you're talking about just D-line, he's still a playable guy. And we've seen these interior defensive linemen. These guys can go for a while and look good. Like when they get to that age 27, 8, 29, 30, 31, that feels like when those guys are in their prime because they kind of, they're not 100% reliant on speed. They're reliant on strength, and they're reliant on, just being a veteran and figuring out their moves. So those are the type of guys I think you can always count on those guys. Not always, but, those are guys you can count on as they get a little bit older to still maintain that high quality of play. So I like him. And again, he's a guy that I think most people completely forget about. So if you go deep in your draft, you're like, oh man, I missed on some of these top edge rushers. He's a nice guy you can get late. That's a good fill in that you can play most weeks. And again, if you're playing a defensive tackle league, I love him in a defensive tackle league. If you miss out on those top 3 or 4 or 5 defensive tackles, he's a great guy to put in there, and he's going to get you solid points. It's not, some of these defensive tackles, you're like completely hit or miss. They either get a sack or they score you 0. He actually gets tackles and does some other things. So he's a guy you can count on to get you some points.
No, absolutely. Another player here for the Miami Dolphins who I think is a value, and again, it depends on how deep your bench is. Do you roll 3 defensive linemen? Do you roll 4 defensive linemen deep? If you have a deep bench here, somebody for the Miami Dolphins who weeks 10 through 18 led, and by a wide margin, the team in total pressures here with 42 and 6 sacks. Chop Robinson, I was pretty not high on Chop Robinson coming out of Penn State last year, just because he was a very, based off of what the NFL scouts were saying, a very raw prospect, athletically gifted, but technically not exactly sound. And then you saw, what happened. Bradley Chubb didn't come back basically last year because he was recovering from the ACL. Jalen Phillips retore his Achilles, right? And then it's like, okay, here you go, Chop Robinson. By default, you're a primary edge rusher here.
Yeah, he was one of my plays in our plays and fades during the season episode. He was a play for me a lot of weeks. He went on a tear a little bit there near the end of the year. I actually liked that a lot. I thought Chop was good. Another guy that if people aren't paying attention, he's a guy that could definitely fall a little bit in your draft. You could get good value on him.
Yeah, Dynasty IDP question here from Jamie. A trade just happened in the 32-team league. Keon White and Ernest Jones for Akeem Davis-Gaither and Frankie Luvu. Which side do you, JT, like better?
For me in this one, I Frankie Luvu. I know you're a Commanders guy. You like Frankie. But I'm taking Keon White and Ernest Jones here. I like Keon White for the Patriots. He got off to a crazy good start, especially in defensive tackle start leagues. He was when Cam Hayward got hurt, Keon White was my guy. I was playing Keon White in every defensive tackle league that I had when I had him and Cam Ward. Not Cam Ward. Sorry, Cameron Hayward. And when Hayward was out, Keon White was my guy. He kind of tailed off a little bit near the end of the season, but man, he was good. I think that Patriots team is going to be better, especially defense. And Ernest Jones, the guy keeps getting traded. He keeps getting moved, but he keeps putting up stats everywhere he goes. And I think him and Luvu are really close. And I think White's better than Davis-Gaither. So that's my assessment of that for me.
So, you have 2 linebackers here in Akeem Davis-Gaither and Ernest Jones, who are technically going to be free agents this year. So for me, I look at which one has the higher upside. And we've talked about this ad nauseum, and we're going to keep talking about it. The fact that Ernest Jones was moved through 3 teams all in the span of 1 season,
which is almost unheard of NFL wise. Like, I can't remember the last time a guy played on that many teams a season that wasn't like a low end practice squad player that was like getting picked up and dropped and cut and moving. You know what I mean? We've seen it with like kickers and practice squad players, but a guy that's like a clear cut starter and a possible top 10 or 15 player in his position, like getting moved that much is like, is there something going on with him? Do people just not like him? Is he running people the wrong way? Is it a Brandon Cook situation where he's like a guy that's going to constantly get moved his whole career, yet he keeps producing no matter where he's at? Is that where we're going to be at with Ernest Jones? I don't know.
Well, but here's the thing, right? If I had to trust one of these linebackers to produce, even though he's moved around from team to team to team, he produced everywhere he went, And so I'd rather take the known, person here with Ernest Jones and go Keon White and Ernest Jones. So yeah, Jamie, which side were you on, or which side do you like the most, Jamie? Let us know in the chat here going forward.
I'll give you my honorable mention here.
Go for it.
Another guy that I'm going to throw in as a defensive tackle guy that you want in defensive tackle start leagues. He's probably not a guy in just a D-line league you're going to jump on just yet, but he's a guy if you got a big roster and you might want to take him late in your draft, and that's Johnny Jerzon Newton from Washington Commanders. Second-year player out of Illinois, was a fourth pick in the second round. Many people had him ranked as a first-round prospect, but he had a foot injury, was not able to do a lot of testing and stuff going into the combine. I think that hurt him. So he dropped to the second round, which I thought was, outstanding value for the Commanders. He ended up coming back, played in 16 games, so it wasn't like he missed all year, but he was playing behind some studs and some guys that had been there for a long time. So you knew there was going to be a little bit of weight on Johnny Newton when he was going to get playing time. Well, that time is now. They just released Allen. So Johnny Newton, come on down. He should be coming in as a clear-cut starter for the Commanders this year. Had just over 40 tackles, 2 sacks, pass defense, forced fumble last year. But again, coming off that foot injury, he should be healthy coming in the year this year. The guy has got a motor. He was phenomenal to watch at the University of Illinois. I absolutely loved him. I think he could be and I said this last year, and I still believe it. I think he could be right up there as one of the next best great pass rushers from the inside. I just think he has that type of ability. He's going to be just 23 when the season hits. Just before the season starts, he'll turn to 23. Guy I just really like. And because of the injury, not playing full-time last year, he's a guy that's going to be slipping in drafts, especially startups. People aren't going to be looking at him the same way. I think he is just a phenomenal value, especially if you're in a league with a little bit of a shorter bench. He's a defensive tackle I would absolutely invest in. If I'm going to only take 1 or 2 defensive tackles for my team because I maybe don't have the space, or I want to roster more like DNs and linebackers and kind of load up there, Johnny Newton, taking him and maybe an older guy. I mean, I would take a Seiler and Newton together in a league. I would take both those guys as my 2 defensive tackles, and I would feel really good about it.
No, I don't blame you one bit. Again, you want to look for value. We could tell you, take a Trey Hendrickson, which let me tell you, the fact that he wants out of Cincinnati and you don't know where he's going to go, that might scare the crap out of some fantasy managers. And you're like, well, he's not a first-round pick in my IDP draft, or he's not going to be the first guy I'm looking at. Take a shot. You may actually find even though he's a pretty huge name in IDP circles, people just may not value him because of the uncertainty of where he's going to end up playing going forward because of his trade demand. So, even the big names you have to look out for in terms of what is their situation, what are they heading into 2025. Let's go to the linebacker position. We talked about the Seahawks ad nauseum a little bit earlier. Not ad nauseum. I think we covered them pretty fairly, and we were talking about how the defense is going to definitely have a lot more opportunities this year if they don't really build up their offense, which I don't anticipate them doing. So Tyrese Knight, we know Ernest Jones is a free agent. Tyrese Knight is not. Just played phenomenally this past year as a rookie. Him and Ernest Jones were both eating. He is currently my Dynasty linebacker 20, which you can find over at fantasyandframes.com. I'll be finalizing my Dynasty IDP rankings very soon, and they'll be up and running this weekend. Good tackle rate, good low miss tackle rate linebacker. You definitely want to invest in, linebackers that are on bad teams, first of all, which I anticipate Seattle being in full rebuild mode. So it's going to be a minute until, said Seahawks are back to being, the elite of the elite here. Which is great for the secondary for Seattle. It's great for the linebacking core here. It's good things for Tyrese Knight going forward. And again, younger player, get a lot of value. People might see Ernest Jones and maybe he's gotten the name value and recognition. Wait a couple rounds, get Tyrese Knight. He's basically Ernest Jones, part 2 or 1B to his 1A, as far as how they were producing in Seattle last year. And again, a second-year player, Dynasty, build for the long term, build that youth. Once you get those established players on your roster, and just, the sky's the limit for him.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I agree. If you were in a dynasty league and you were smart enough to go grab him late in the year, which I was in a couple leagues, you're going to be really happy you were wise and went and grabbed him near the end of the year last year. But yeah, in the startup league, I think he's definitely a guy I want on my list.
Who do you got as a linebacker here?
Well, switching over from the Seahawks, a guy that used to play in Seattle, now in Miami, Jordan Brooks, a guy that kind of fell after having some really, really great years. Coming back from injury. People are like, oh, how good is he going to be? Moved to the Dolphins this last year. Well, we got a really nice season out of Jordan Brooks. He was right there, over 140 tackles. He gave you 3 sacks, gave you 6 passes defensed. He was a quality play pretty much week in and week out last year. A guy feels like he's been in the league a long time, right? You're like, Jordan Brooks, and he's been around forever. Still only 27 years old. He's got years left in him. So I think Jordan Brooks is a solid player. He's one of those guys, if you miss out on those top end linebackers, say you miss a run and you go defensive end heavy early and you kind of wait on linebacker, Jordan Brooks is a guy I like. His value has dropped a little bit since those first couple years in Seattle. I think it's unjustified, to be honest with you. I don't know why you would like him a whole lot less than you did 2 or 3 years ago. He's still putting up quality numbers. You didn't know what it was going to look like in Miami. Now we saw it. He was good. He was good in Miami. I think he'll be good again. Jordan Brooks is a guy. I just think the name recognition is not as high as it used to be, and you can get him at a better price than he was. And again, 27. He's not as old as you think he is, because it just feels like you've heard his name in IDP circles forever, because he came on the scene, pretty hot and heavy out of Texas Tech. So I like Jordan Brooks. I'm going to be investing in quite a bit of him in startups.
For me, my next linebacker, I believe he'll be entering his 3rd year out of Washington State. Yes, the Chargers drafted Junior Colson from Michigan. Harbaugh brought one of his peeps over from Michigan to be the next all-star linebacker. Well, Diane Henley, not exactly chump change either. One of the premier tackling linebackers in all of football, as well as one of the top performers in all of IDP Fantasy Football. I have him as my linebacker 7, and I'm not scared off by Junior Colson coming back after being out, last year with an injury. We look at the productivity. I want to say since week 8, he had one game where he had less than 10 tackles, less than 10 total tackles. Like, you look at the Fantasy Pros fantasy points scoring since week 8, 14, 20, 25, 14, 13, 12, 12, 11, 15. Just unreal production. He literally went from like somebody who I think he's got some upside. There's some shine, to like, holy crap, this kid is amazing. He's not even a kid. He's a man. Like, this guy was playing like a man possessed for the Los Angeles Chargers. Again, name value. You're going to find name value for other linebackers. He is somebody that you could definitely in your startups pick up. In the later rounds, mid to late rounds of your, not late rounds, but the mid rounds of your IDP draft. Again, go for those young guys, go for the value. Do not get scared off by Junior Colson. There's no reason why both Colson and Henley can't both feast in this linebacking core.
I agree. I mean, you got Henley, people got to remember, he was kind of converted linebacker. He kind of mostly played strong safety at Washington State in college. So that people were like, oh, is he big enough? Can he play? So he was a little bit of adjustment time, but he's done a really nice job. He was really good. He was one of my sleepers. The year he came out, I really liked him. I just thought, watching his film, I was like, man, this guy's just a baller. He knows how to play. My honorable mention, and I'm just going to say it because we just talked about it, was Junior Colson. I was big. He was my bet to win NFL rookie of the year defensively last year. Ended up having surgery in camp, had some stuff going on, kind of missed a lot of time preseason, didn't come in, kind of had to play catch up. He's going way later this year than he was last year because of how well the other guys played. I think he takes over Perryman's spot, but I think both these guys can be successful. Pretty disappointing rookie year. Played in 11 games, only had 28 tackles and 1 pass defense. Not what you were looking for Junior Colson. I'm expecting a big bounce back here in year 2 for him. And I think both of these guys are going to be able to put up tackles. I really do. I think they're both playable, both worth taking in startup drafts. So Junior Colson's a guy I was all on last year, and I'm sticking with it this year. I'm back in on him, and I'm back in for cheaper this year.
For those people who are looking for, building that foundation around a stud, a couple of weeks ago, we didn't know what exactly the future had for Zach Bond. I mean, he played special teams for the Saints for 2 years previously. Then he comes over to Philadelphia, gets that middle linebacker role. And, there's a reason why he was nominated for the best defensive player of the year, losing to Patrick Surtain at the NFL honors. But, he just got locked up to a great deal of $51 million for 3 years, I think, for the Philadelphia Eagles. He ain't going anywhere.
Nope.
And clearly, they have an eye for talent. If they're willing to commit that much to a middle linebacker, which I feel is like very atypical of Philadelphia, know that he is the real deal. And somebody, again, it depends. Recency bias could be a what. So people may actually remember him and be like, oh, yeah, I'm grabbing him. But like in leagues where people are not exactly IDP savvy, they may just keep looking for the bigger names and kind of like, Zach Bond, I guess I'll get him in the second round. If you got Zach Bond in an IDP only league, 12 team in the second round, you are either, playing with children or you are incredibly lucky. Because I would not.
Yeah, he's definitely, now that he's re-signed, because I know we talked about this before this. We're like, right, where would you rank him? I'm like, man, it really depends on if he goes back to the Eagles or goes somewhere else. I'm like, if he goes back to the Eagles with the way he played and the way their defense is, I was like, I love him. He's moving way up my dynasty rankings. If he moves on, I was like, I got to wonder where he fits somewhere else. So now that he's back in Philly, I definitely have to re-rank him in my dynasty rankings and move him way up. Because I think at this point, there's no reason with him going back there. There's no reason to think that he won't be able to kind of somewhat replicate this season, even if he doesn't hit the numbers he had this year, which were unbelievable. He still should be a guy that you're considering a top 5 to 10 output as far as IDP linebackers, off the ball linebackers.
Absolutely. What's another linebacker you got here, JT?
Yeah, so my other linebacker that I have on my list, I like Peyton Wilson from the Steelers, second-year player out of North Carolina State. He really made his way into the lineup, made some really big plays near the end of the season. Here's the thing. I like Patrick Queen. I do like Patrick Queen. He was disappointing a little bit when it came to IDP this last year. You can get Peyton Wilson for a whole lot cheaper than you can get Patrick Queen for the Steelers. I think Wilson continues to move up dynasty rankings. He was an absolute stud for the Wolfpack in college. The biggest issue and why he fell in drafts was he had a bunch of injuries in college that required surgery, and people just weren't sure how long he would last. So Wilson's a guy that I'm buying at cost for the Steelers. I just see a lot of upside from him. And I do think there's a good chance that eventually he becomes the number one wide receiver for this, or no, number one wide receiver, number one inside linebacker, misspoke, for the Steelers.
We look at a linebacker who's kind of been like in the way of people. I guess that's putting it very, very nicely. Landon Roberts, he was getting snaps over Peyton Wilson, which is unfortunate last year for him, for Wilson. With Roberts being a free agent, I don't know if they bring him back and they just kind of give, Peyton Wilson, here's the middle of the field. Have fun. You know what I mean? So definitely a lot of opportunity potentially coming his way. Jamie in the chat says he's a fan of Peyton Wilson, but he hates the Steelers. Well, then JT hates you because he's a Steelers fan. So,
Do you know what, Jamie? I still love you, even though he's a Browns guy. I still love him. My roommate in college at Syracuse was a Browns fan from the Cleveland area. So, we still get along. We still like each other. So it's okay. We can still we can agree. And my neighbor, honestly, I'm not even gonna lie to you, my neighbor like 4 houses down from me is a big Browns fan. So we get together and watch Browns Steelers game and talk trash to each other the entire time.
nice. Gotta love that. Gotta love that. All right, let's finish off with our favorite position, JT, which other people don't give enough credit. Let's talk about some defensive backs here. Let's start with you. Who do you got as a defensive back people should be taking away in their startup drafts or IDP?
So he was my rookie DB1 last year coming in the draft, and that was Tyler Nubin out of Minnesota. Ended up going to the Giants. He had a very good, very productive rookie season. I think he's just going to get better. People were a little bit worried about the combine numbers because he wasn't like an off the charts athlete. But I said I didn't care because I'm like, this guy just knows how to play football. He reads and reacts, and he's not relying on crazy athletic ability to make up for bad reads and bad positioning. He impressed me. I liked him. If people aren't super high or don't really, think about him being on the fact that the Giants are a bad team or at least have been bad, they're going to try to hopefully get better here. But I like Newman a lot. He basically replaced Xavier McKinney moving over to the Packers. Newman kind of played a little more of that free safety plus strong safety. So I like him a little bit better in the Xavier McKinney because he did actually play more box safety, which was better. McKinney was pretty much playing free safety most of the time. So Tyler Nubin, again, kind of on a theme with some of these second-year players. I always tell people I think the second year is the best time to buy guys. Guys that are going to the second year, if they didn't absolutely explode as rookies, people are always kind of real hyped up about the rookies, and then they kind of forget about guys that are the year 2 guys because they get hyped up about the new rookies coming in. And unless the guys absolutely blew the lid off as a rookie, those guys tend to lose just a little bit of value, especially in startup drafts. So they kind of tend to go a little bit later than they did the year before. So that's when I really like to pounce and jump on those guys. That's why I said the Peyton Wilsons, the Johnny Newtons, and now here Tyler Newman. These are guys I'm definitely looking at. So Tyler Newman, definitely a guy I think you can get at a pretty good value, and he easily could be your DB1 with no problem. I if he was my DB1 on my team, I'm happy with that.
Oh, I love that. For me, I'm going to go to Cincinnati, and I'm going to go with Jordan Battle. He in his rookie year, he was supposedly going to be the next big strong safety, box safety, and then what did the Bengals do? They go out and they get Geno Stone and bring back Von Bell. It's like, what is happening here? And it didn't take. It took quite a while, to be honest with you, for the Bengals to finally realize, hey, Jordan Battle, he's been working through a lot. He's gotten better at everything he's doing, and they gave him the reins, and he didn't look back. The young man just has been playing, lights out, especially weeks 10 through 18. Just his positioning and alignment on the field has been excellent. He leads all the Bengals in box snaps with 183. He played 155 at free safety, but again, that's because they were using him a lot in coverage earlier in the year, and then they realized, hey, this guy is a good tackler. He can make tackles. He can make plays. This is the guy you want. Down the stretch, he had, a couple double-digit fantasy point games. Again, just the opportunity is there. The alignment on the field is there, and the Bengals have faith in him. And he's a young player who you can get again in the later rounds and probably deep into the later rounds of your IDP draft. That is going to build you a solid foundation at the defensive back position. So, Jordan Battle, I got your back.
I'm on that. I like Battle, and I think they've learned they're done messing around with these older guys. I think Battle comes in clearly the starter and has earned that spot. So I like that call big time.
Who's your second defensive back you got for us here?
My second guy, this is a guy you just never knew what the Rams were doing defensively. Like week to week, you're like, okay, who's here? Who's playing where? Who's playing, slot corner? Who's playing box safety? Who's playing the deep? Quentin Lake for the Rams was a guy that, while not spectacular last year, you could pretty much count on him every week to give you solid turnout, solid numbers. He was good. At times he was playing the slot corner. At times he was playing the strong safety. Cameron Kitchens, the rookie, kind of got in there and started getting some more playing time. But even when Lake moved into different spots, even if they had him playing a little more outside corner, he still ended up producing. He had tackles. He was putting up good numbers. And he's a guy that I consider, unless you have some people that are really on it, he's got to be damn near free in your drafts. Like I would doubt very many people are like super high on Quentin Lake trying to like, oh, he's on my list of guys to go get. You know what I mean? I don't think he is. The guys, going into year 4, he was a former 6th-round pick. So we know like, hey, those guys usually kind of get ignored. But he's kind of earned some trust with the Rams. Going to year 4, he just turned 26. So, you got him in a good age, right in the prime there. Last year was the first year he was a pretty much considered a full-time starter, played all 17 games, had over 100 tackles, 2 sacks, 5 passes defense, didn't have any INTs. So he wasn't a big gamer as far as like a guy that gave you some big games that gave you wins. But he was a very nice floor player last year for the Rams. Like you could just count on him getting some solid tackles and doing some stuff for you. I just really liked what I saw out of Quentin Lake last year. And again, if you wait on DB and you're one of those people like, I just do not want to spend draft capital on DBs, Quentin Lake is a nice guy to go after real late. He should be there in your startup drafts. And if he's I prefer him to be my DB3, but if you absolutely just wait and figure out, hey, I'm going to pick up somebody if they hit at the beginning of the year, and he ends up being your DB2 to start the year, I don't hate it.
My last defensive back, or my next defensive back and last player for this evening, is probably not even the most popular safety on his own team, and based off of the name recognition his counterpart has on the Steelers, he's probably still a value, and that's Deshaun Elliott. Despite finishing last season in Fantasy Pro scoring as the defensive back 6, averaging 12 points a game. Again, Minkah Fitzpatrick. Minkah Fitzpatrick is such a great player. He is a great player. That doesn't mean he's a great IDP fantasy football player.
He wasn't last year.
That is for damn sure. Now, and it's crazy because you look at the box snaps between the two, where folks who are kind of relatively new to IDP, and you're hearing me talk about box snaps and positional alignment, it really matters for these defensive backs, because what you really want is opportunities to make plays on the ball. That's how you accumulate your points. That's how you rack up your tackles, right? And so these defensive backs or these safeties, or even in cornerback specifically, those who can play in the box also and help out and run support. They basically become de facto hybrid linebackers who also can play in coverage. And Deshaun Elliott led the Steelers in weeks 10 through 18 in box snaps, 161 to 154 for Minkah Fitzpatrick. And now you might be saying, well, that's 154 box snaps. Well, you know where they had Minkah at? 322 snaps of free safety. They had him playing strictly mostly in coverage, and it was really Deshaun Elliott who only had to play 81 snaps at free safety. Like, he was helping out there and run support, and again, that could be attributed to how weak linebacker was for the Pittsburgh Steelers in terms of inside linebacker. I don't see them, and they could potentially make a splash and get one of the upper echelon, rookie prospects at the linebacker position. They already spent a draft pick on Peyton Wilson last year. I'd be very surprised if they did it again this year, which means you could potentially have another year of Deshaun Elliott helping out and run support, especially with a second-year player who didn't get a lot of playing time last year in Peyton Wilson. So, again, a positional value. I'm not going to tell you, well, you should get, Buda Baker and, Derwin James. Like, obviously these are top.
If you get those guys, grab them. But, how early do you have to grab them is the question.
Yeah, thank you. That's where I was going with that. If you're in a good position to grab them, but you can wait on the value. And some of these names are not household names, yet they produce, and that's what you want for fantasy. So yeah, folks. For me, it's Jordan Battle and Deshaun Elliott. Any other names for defensive backs we should drop?
Yeah, I got a little bit of a flyer for people. If you want to take a shot on a guy late in your draft, a guy you can stash, especially if you've got a taxi squad and you can put a second year player on a taxi squad. I like him a lot. I think he's going to see increased playing time this year, and that's Jaden Hicks of the Chiefs, another second year player. I know I'm just beating that theme home tonight. Fourth round pick by the Chiefs, guy that played all 17 games last year, mostly played special teams, but he really started to see a lot more snaps near the end of the year. And then when you looked at the playoffs, he played in all the postseason playoff games, and played a pretty good percentage of snaps in every game. So all the postseason playoff games, he's a guy that's got really good talent. I think he takes over the starting strong safety role for them next year and plays that box safety. He's going to be 23 in August, going into his second year. And I just like what I saw at him at the end of the year. Whenever he got opportunities, he made plays. For the year, he ended up with 24 tackles, so nothing huge, but he did have 5 passes defensed and 3 interceptions. Almost all that came in the final 4 weeks of the season. He was a guy that really saw playing time near the end of the year. So he's a guy, if someone's going in the draft and they're looking at draft capital, ADP, scoring from last year, Jaden Hicks isn't going to be anywhere on the list. He's going to be nowhere to be found. So he's a guy I think that you can grab and you can take even with one of your last draft picks. He's a guy I like stashing. I think even if you don't draft him, maybe he's a guy you keep an eye on, and he's like one of the first guys you pick up on the free agent waiver wire. So I just really like Jaden Hicks. He was one of my top safeties last year coming into the draft. Ended up dropping to the 4th round. I thought he would possibly been a late second, early 3rd round pick. Ended up getting the 4th round. But everything I've read, everything I've heard is the Chiefs really like him, and they were impressed with him throughout the year. And I said I saw those uptick of playing time at the end of the season, and he played a bunch in the playoffs. So they obviously were starting to really trust him. If you're taking a team that goes to the Super Bowl, giving him a ton of snaps in 3 playoff games, including the Super Bowl. So I'm reading the tea leaves a little bit there for the Chiefs, and I think that he takes over that role next year. He's a guy I want to take as my favorite flyer at the DP position.
No, and you're absolutely right. And the fact is that there is talk that Justin Reed could be on his way out, which opens the door for Jaden Hicks right there. So
exactly.
Love that. So that's going to round us out here. Just to recap, my linebackers were Tyrese Knight and Diane Henley. Yours were JT.
Yes. Sorry about that. We talking about D lineman?
No, linebackers. Who were your 2 linebackers?
Yep. So my linebackers were Jordan Brooks of the Dolphins and Peyton Wilson of the Steelers. 2 guys that Brooks a little more of a household name, but I think you can still get good value. And I think Peyton Wilson is a guy on the uptick.
And then for defensive linemen, I had Nolan Smith and Nick Benito.
I took Trayvon Walker from the Jaguars and then Tuli Tuapolotu for the Chargers. I think he is in for a big year. I like Tuli a ton with all the moves over there for the Chargers.
And then I finally took Jordan Battle and Deshaun Elliott, and you rounded us out with
Tyler Newman, 2nd year safety for the Giants, and Quentin Lake, I think, is a guy you can get real late in your drafts, and he's got not a huge ceiling, but a nice floor on a week-to-week basis if you're looking for somebody to kind of fill things in. We got one question here from Angie before we get things going. She's asking about Roquan Smith. What are our thoughts next season on Roquan? Is it crazy to consider keeping Bond instead of Roquan in my keeper league? This is a great question, Angie.
This is good. So if Trenton Simpson had become a thing for the Baltimore Ravens, a second-year linebacker, I believe, last year, filling in for Patrick Queen, who went to Pittsburgh. Then I can understand where you're coming from in terms of wanting to keep Bond because Bond had the splashy season. But let's cool it a little bit. You know what I mean? Like Roquan Smith is still Roquan Smith. He's one of the elite linebackers in all of football. Zach Bond had a great year and got a great contract. That's a little bit too rich for my blood to get rid of Roquan Smith for Zach Bond. What about you?
I agree. I know Bond had just a splash year, but Roquan's still only 27, and he's been great every year he's been in the league. Now, people can say maybe he had a slight down year in some people's mind last year, but it was pretty much on par with the year he had before. Very, very solid. We know who Roquan is. You know what you're going to get out of him. It's just, again, the floor with him is so high. You're just going to get solid production. And he doesn't do all the other stuff crazy to get you the big play stuff. But if you're in a league with a pretty high tackle, points per tackle, like Roquan, he's a tough guy to beat.
Yeah. I mean, like in 2023, using Fantasy Pros IDP scoring, he tallied 221 total points. Last year, he tallied 211.3. So, yeah, a little bit of drop off. But, 84 solo tackles to 81 and 24, comparing to 23. 23, 74 assisted tackles, 24, 73 assists. So, yeah.
I mean, Zach Bond was number 2 in scoring, and Roquan was 14. Right. But Zach Bond got off to a crazy start, and fumble recovery, sacks, all that. Tackle numbers were pretty similar. Like I said, Bond had a little bit more of the impact plays last year, and that kind of was the difference for him as far as like that higher scoring. But to me, I still think I gotta lean Roquan there.
Just for the consistency,
Exactly. You know what you're getting in Roquan. You're hoping that Bond does something similar to last year. And I think he can. But I mean, you're going to be right on the top 10 with Roquan no matter what. Bond, you're hoping he's top 10 again. Him being top 3 or 4 is probably, I would say, kind of unrealistic, to be honest with you. I don't know if he has that exact same season again, but you're hoping he's top. If you have Zach Bond, you're hoping he's top 15. Roquan, I don't think there's any question that he's going to be top 15 unless there's an injury. Roquan's going to be top 15 and most likely top 10.
100%. Thanks, Angie. Thank you very much for tuning in. You are awesome. You're such an awesome supporter of Fantasy and Frames. We really appreciate you. We appreciate all of you who have tuned in to Shoot the Gap tonight. And again, thank you very much for those who went over to our YouTube channel and subscribe. Thank you very much to those who are following us here at Fantasy and Frames. You can follow just JT at JT Orange. Over on X, you can follow me at Jorge B. Edwards. Over on X, before we get out of here, Jamie in the chat says, thanks, guys. Great show as always. Thank you very much. We really appreciate that. Again, folks, we have 3 shows next week. Yes, we have missed some time. We have 3 shows next week. We got IDP rookie linebacker prospects on Tuesday, defensive lineman rookie prospects on Wednesday, and defensive back prospects on Thursday, back to back to back. So, we got you covered. And then we hit free agency the week after. Before we get out of here, JT, as we do always, anything you want to mention or talk about?
Yeah, just nice to get back here on Shoot the Gap. I know we've been scheduling. We haven't been able to quite get it together, but we're going to be piling up. We're going to be getting things going. Was at the draft this last week. Thanks for Fantasy and Frames helping me and John get our passes, our press passes there. We had a great time. Looking forward to it next year. Hopefully I had a lot of stuff piled up right around the draft. Hopefully I get to spend almost a whole week there next year would be really nice. So, but it was a great time. Always loved the draft. The combine. Now we're getting ready. Now we got the combine out of the way. Now we get pro days coming up, and then we got the draft. The draft's 6 weeks away? Yeah. Gonna be here before we know it. Can't wait. It's gonna be awesome.
You kept saying the draft over and over again, and I know you meant combine. Let me tell you, with the draft being in Green Bay, you better believe I've been looking over to the missus and saying, not even saying anything, but like giving like the look of like I really want to go. And then I turn my head. You know what she does? She does like the Lion King Zimba thing with Nathaniel, and it's like, yeah, this is why you're not. But
I tell you what, I think me and John were talking about it last week at the combine. I think we're skipping this year. There is not enough hotels in Green Bay. They're going from unreal prices right now. It's insane. If you look up Green Bay right now, Green Bay, Wisconsin, and you try to find an Airbnb or a hotel for that draft weekend, it's through the roof. I think we're going to pass stay home and we're going to go to Pittsburgh. So you should meet us in Pittsburgh next year.
well,
Yeah, get you a little bit of time. You're a little closer to you. Get you
yeah.
another year for the kid. To kind of get settled. I think that's a good idea. So we need to get a big group all together up in Pittsburgh. I know my cousin has it on his calendar. He's a big Steelers fan who's the guy that kind of turned me on to the Steelers as a kid. He lives a couple hours away in Columbus, Ohio. So I know he's in the mix. So we're talking about getting a big group and trying to get an Airbnb for Pittsburgh next year for the draft. So Jorge, we'll have to get a Fantasy and Frames house going.
The craziness that'll happen, just imagine it. I don't even want to imagine it. It's going to be that awesome. No, folks, seriously, thank you very much. The article work is starting to pick up here. One of our own, Kyle Ziegler, has been talking about players and free agent players, as talking about potential landing spots. We got college fantasy football articles coming out. We have Dynasty articles that are on the horizon, more free agent stuff. We may even be getting a new podcast, knock on wood, for people to pay attention to. We have our Dynasty show. We have a majority of our Fantasy and Frames podcasts coming back the very first week of official free agency, not the tampering period, not next week, but the week after. So everything is starting to get in line. Articles, videos, shorts. I mean, you name it, we got all the content coming your way. And then before you know it, it's draft day. And next thing you know, after that, then we're getting into the real heart of startup season for Dynasty and, IDP. We got a lot of stuff coming your way. I'll stop talking and rambling on.
No, you're great. I got my rookie rankings for IDP up right now on DLF, so you can go over there and get those. Also, if you're looking for, you're not a person that pays attention to college a lot and you're trying to get these names and figure out who some of these guys are offensively, the Dynasty Evaluation Podcast and me and John McGlynn here on Fantasy and Frames, we've been doing a ton of spotlights. We've had a million really cool guests that have come on and do those shows. So go back to Fantasy and Frames and check those out either on YouTube or on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Check those out. We kind of break down. Most of the shows are about 35 minutes to an hour where we're breaking down different players in the draft. We got some top end guys and we got some sleeper guys. So we kind of are all over the board on that, but a lot of good content there for people to check out.
Yeah, we do a lot. When you stop and just observe like what we do here at Fantasy and Frames, like we got like 30 plus.
Like Grover was like, I thought it was off season. I'm like, there is no off season. It's Dynasty football. She's like, I was like, I got this show, I got this show. She's like, I thought football was over. I'm like, oh no, podcasting, the Dynasty never stops.
No, seriously, like I will start going downstairs and my wife will be like, baby bottles. I'm like, in the sterilizer, bottles of formula in the refrigerator. I make sure I have everything covered before I retreat to the
absolutely. Oh, before we get out of here, Scott, real last question. Joey Bosa, we just talked about him. Go back and check out the show here. Go back, rewind it after we're done here. We talk about him. We talk about Tua Tagovailoa for the Chargers, one of my favorite guys. We kind of discussed that here in the show. So yeah, go back and check that out.
Definitely. You will not regret it, Scott. So thank you very much for tuning in. Yes, we do talk about Joey Bosa and the Chargers situation. So really, go back and let us know what you think. Put a comment in the comments. And anyhow, it's late. It's Friday. I can't talk anymore. JT, it's been a blast as always. We'll see you on Tuesday for our very special rookie IDP prospect episode on linebackers. For JT, I'm Jorge. I'm about to press a button. We'll see you next week.